All right, so first of all, thank you very much for the introduction. I've got a slide on a little bit of my background, but given the introduction, we'll go through that quickly. My name is Blake Yaeger. I'm currently the managing director for our TechStars cloud program that we run down the road in San Antonio, Texas. My contact info is up here. If you have any questions about anything I talk about today, or just kind of TechStars or startups in general, feel free to reach out to me at any time. Happy to engage offline as well. So, we kind of just went through my background a little bit. I was working as a product manager at Rackspace in 2009, 2010, and I was part of the group that originally founded the OpenStack project. Kind of a funny story, actually, in this building was where we did the original OpenStack Design Summit. It was down a few floors below this, but it was when we were kind of originally getting a bunch of stakeholders together to launch that project. I moved to HP, where I helped start the public cloud group inside of HP, which we built around OpenStack. And then I joined a little startup called ZeroVM, which had a very interesting kind of lightweight containerization technology based on the Google Native Client project. We got acquired by Rackspace, and so I spent some time working on integrating that technology into Rackspace. And then about a year and a half ago, I left and joined TechStars. A little bit about TechStars. So we're kind of a global ecosystem. We run over 20 accelerator programs kind of throughout the world. We've got them throughout the US, and then we've got international locations in London, Berlin, Tel Aviv, and Cape Town. And we partner with a bunch of different organizations and help run accelerators for them as well. So what I wanted to spend most of the time talking about is kind of what it takes to get into an accelerator, and I'll talk a little bit about TechStars specifically, but that's just because that's where my experience lies. But the same is very true whether it's Capital Factory, Y Combinator, 500 startups, or any number of other accelerator programs that are out there. A lot of us are looking for a lot of the same traits in our founders and the companies that we want to invest in and help accelerate. And so I thought I'd start by showing you, this is a slide that I show day one of program. We've got 10 or 11 companies that we've just selected. They're in the accelerator, and we're trying to explain to them why they're actually here. And what you'll notice when we talk about these bullet points is we're talking a lot about the individuals and the teams. And ultimately, that is what we are looking for when we're selecting companies. We have a little saying inside of TechStars. We got 6 things we look for: team, and then market, traction, and idea. And you'll notice idea is last, because at the end of the day, your idea is going to change. You're going to pivot. You're going to refine it. You're going to refocus it. Some of that will be based on feedback from mentors and other investors, people that you meet while you're going through the accelerator. Some of that will be based on what your customers are telling you, what those early customers are saying about what they like or don't like about your product. And so we think it's really important not to get married to your idea too early in the process. And when we talk about team, there's really several different things we're looking for. First, we're looking for a very well-rounded team. We want a team that has complementary skill sets. Starting a company is going to be hard. It's very rare that somebody's going to be able to, one, take care of everything that needs to get done. There's a lot that needs to do. So just from the sheer sharing the workload, you're going to need other people to share it with. But there's a lot of ups and downs, and you need kind of a support system around you. And your team of co-founders can be a part of that support system. When things get bad and you need somebody to just commiserate with about how tough this is and how much it sucks. And when things are good and things are growing like crazy and you need to be able to delegate different aspects of the business out, your team is a big part of that. And I've heard, both of our speakers today have emphasized this, so I'm glad to hear that, because it is very true when it comes to starting an early stage company. We do think market is important. We want to know that you are approaching a market that is big enough that you can actually grow a really big successful business in this space. Again, this is something that's probably going to change a little bit over time, and oftentimes you're trying to create a new market, a market that doesn't exist today. And so I don't necessarily like people that kind of try to come in and say this is a $4.2 billion market because we did this intense top-down analysis, and that's what all the market research reports have told us. That doesn't really mean a lot to me, but knowing that I could kind of see that without you kind of having to inflate the numbers kind of from a bottoms-up approach, that there's enough people out there in the world that would find what you're doing is valuable and they'd be willing to pay you something for it, that you could build a company that's making at least $100 million in revenue. That's kind of like my threshold. Like, all right, if I can reasonably see without having to take too many wild leaps of faith that this could be kind of a $100 million type of revenue company, then I feel like the market's big enough. And the market's also important because I think as was said earlier, like your experience is a big part of the credibility that's going to kind of get people convinced that you can attack this opportunity, and your experience should be somewhat relevant to that market, or your team members should have experience that's relevant to that market. If you have experience in a completely different, consumer music startups and you're wanting to go solve the world's, robotics problems, that's, you better have somebody that's got some robotics experience on your team, or that experience isn't relevant at all. And then traction. Traction's another big one. We don't expect companies to come in with a fully polished, final version of the product that they're out there selling and people are paying thousands of dollars for. But we want to see that as a team, they're able to execute and they're able to get things done together. That might be a functional prototype that they've gotten in the hands of some beta testers and they've gotten some feedback on. It might be an initial version of the product. It might be something else that they've built that they've realized, like, wow, this wasn't right at all. We need to go about and build something else. But like kind of showing that as a team, you're able to execute and get things done. That's a really important part to the selection. And then you do obviously need an idea. You can't just come in and say like, well, we're going to figure something out. Like you should come in with an idea. But again, that's something we put the least amount of effort on because we know that's the thing that's most likely to change as you learn and kind of continue down your path. So I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of owning success, and this is true when you're in an accelerator or when you're trying to get into an accelerator. Like, what are the things that you should be doing to ensure that you are putting yourself in the best possible position to not only be successful with the startup you're building, but to be successful in an accelerator or to be successful post an accelerator as you're trying to grow this into a really big company. The first thing I like to talk about is brutal intellectual honesty. When you're in a startup, you can't afford to kind of sugarcoat things and try to worry about making sure everybody feels good and they got their feelings. They get married to an idea and they get attached to it, and they don't want anybody to insult it or tell them maybe they built the wrong thing. This is really important because in order to move fast, you've got to be brutally intellectually honest. There's a great quote from St. Augustine about this. It says, "The truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. Let it loose and it will defend itself." And this is the idea that, like, put everything on the table when you're starting a company. You're going to start with, a hypothesis about, a problem that exists in the market and a solution that you're going to be able to build, to solve that problem, and the idea that people will pay some amount of money to get that problem solved. But assume that everything is open for debate. Any one of those things can be wrong, and any number of them probably are wrong. And this is something that, when I'm giving feedback to companies, and if you're working on starting a company, hopefully you're going out and trying to meet with, people that are in the industry or people that have experience building startups and get feedback on your idea, get feedback from your company. Hopefully you're meeting with customers or potential customers and getting feedback. If you find yourself getting defensive in those conversations, stop for a second, take a step back and say, wait a minute, why am I getting defensive about what they're saying? This person is taking the time to sit down with me and give me some sort of feedback. This is an opportunity to learn from what they're saying rather than to defend kind of my current state. Now there is, you should have a little healthy back and forth, challenge each other and kind of say like, well, why do you say that? Why do you think that way? Why do you think there's no way that this will ever work? Why do you think that nobody will ever pay for this? So don't be afraid to challenge it, but be open and really receptive to hearing what it is they're saying that's wrong, because there's something to be learned from all of those interactions, whether they agree with what you're doing or think you're going to be successful or not. Mastering your meetings. This is another important thing. When you're doing a startup, again, hopefully you're meeting with customers, you're meeting with, mentors, you're meeting with advisors, potential investors. If you are not owning that meeting and running that meeting, then either one of two things is happening. Somebody else is, and you're not potentially getting, what you want out of that meeting. If an investor kind of realizes 5 minutes in that this isn't something he's interested in, he's checked out, he's going to cut you off, and you're not going to have an opportunity to really get into what you thought. or the meeting's just kind of a wandering, meandering mess, and at the end of the day, or at the end of the meeting, whoever you're meeting with is going to say like, man, that was all over the place. Like, I don't know what this person's thinking, and it's not going to be successful either way. So make sure whenever you sit down with somebody, understands basic things like, okay, how much time do we have? And make sure that you're watching the clock and being respectful of their time, and getting through the topics or the agenda that you wanted to get through. Have an agenda when you if you're going to sit down with somebody, you're going to take a meeting with somebody, do a little bit of research, understand their background, understand what you'd like to get out, understand, what are the big challenging questions that you're thinking through at that time, and go in there with that agenda. You don't have to like give them a printed copy of it or anything, but like kind of have it in your mind, and once you find out like, okay, I've got 20 minutes with them, know the topics, and if you see you're wasting 10 minutes on one particular topic, maybe it's a great conversation and you want to just kind of throw the agenda away and adapt. But if you kind of feel like, okay, I've gotten the point here, we should be moving on, make sure you're kind of steering the conversation in the way that you want to go. Get something out of everything. This is something that I think a lot of early stage founders struggle with. Is they look and you'll be meeting with some people that are extremely helpful, they have extremely relevant experience to your industry, your market, the type of company you want to build, and then you're going to be meeting with other people that maybe it's not quite as obvious how they can help you, or how their experience is relevant to what you're building. Whatever it is, whether you're taking a meeting with somebody, whether you're meeting somebody out at a networking happy hour or at an event like this, everybody out there has something to offer. I promise you that. And the key to every interaction you have with somebody is trying to figure out what it is that you can learn from them, that you can benefit from that interaction. Maybe it's a network connection, maybe they have experience in an area where you just happen to be personally weak. Whatever it is, you can gain something from almost every personal interaction you have, and so try to figure out what that is and try to get to that. Focus on your big rocks. So this is a big thing when we've worked with the teams on when they're going through an accelerator. Is as an early stage company, you've got a ton of things that you need to get done. You probably have a to-do list of 50, 60 items on any given day, and if you're not careful, you can wind up getting lots of things done on that list and still not making progress on the 1 to 2 things that are going to move the ball forward for your company that given week. And so I really encourage you to think about every week, sit down and think about, all right, what's the one thing that if we got nothing else done this week, at the end of the week, we'd be like, all right, we took that next step forward. And it's probably not, silly operational overhead things. Like those things need to get done too, but there's usually big rocks and so if you can identify those, and it's going to change week to week, but if you can identify those and figure out, even if it's this big boulder that's going to take a month to do, what's the little piece that we can get done in the next week, so we know we've made progress on that boulder. That's really important, and it'll help you be more efficient. And then do stuff fast. This is just one of the things that I think is really great advice for anybody that's starting an early stage company. Is like, don't spend all your time talking and thinking and analyzing. Just do it. Do it, see what happens, learn from it, try something different. There's nothing worse than sitting around and talking about something and talking about it, and then I'll meet with somebody a couple months later and I'm like, all right, so how's it going? Well, we're still looking at some, we're waiting for this or that, and this hasn't happened yet. Like, just do it and then see what happens. You're never going to have as much data as you want. You're never going to have, you're never going to have a scenario where you figured out all the angles and you know exactly what you need to be doing. So just get out there and do it, and then learn. Another really good thing to do is establish rhythms. I know a lot of people are, especially that are interested in joining or starting a company. They're trying to get out of a corporate environment where there's so much structure, and I've got death by meetings, and I've got this real hierarchical organization. Just because you're in a startup doesn't mean you can get away with not having kind of some basic rhythms. And so everybody needs to figure out what these are for themselves. But there's things that you should be doing on a daily basis. The second point here is something that I see a lot of companies miss. You should be talking to customers or potential customers on a daily basis, or if not daily, at least multiple times a week. You shouldn't be trying to build something in a vacuum. Obviously, you should always be improving the product. soliciting feedback, so that's from customers to point two, but it's also from other people, other industry experts, other people with startup experience. And following up. One of the really important things is when you're meeting these people and talking to them about your company, whether it's customers or mentors or advisors or anything, make sure you're following up with them as well. And then you'll have some weekly cadences. You should have some sort of development cycle in place that's hopefully not lasting weeks at a time, because again, your early stage, things are going to change fast. Your direction will start to shift pretty quickly. You should be emailing updates out. For the people that you've met with that are interested, that are willing to help. Maybe they're official advisors, maybe they're not. Maybe it's just kind of like a loose group of supporters at this point. Email them on a regular basis. Again, it doesn't have to be weekly. Maybe it's once a month, depending on the stage you're at. But give them an update. Let them know how things are going. A blog. If you're going to do a blog, it's something that's important to do very regularly. Not everybody does, but if you're going to take the time to have a blog, do it regularly, or don't bother doing it at all. And so the last thing I wanted to kind of touch on very quickly is your elevator pitch. So this is kind of your first opportunity to make an impression whenever you're meeting somebody. So every time I sit down with a founder and we're going to talk a little about the company, the first thing I ask them is, all right, give me your elevator pitch. And so for a lot of people, this is your first impression. Or if you're out at a networking event and you meet somebody that you just happen to realize is, wow, this could be a really great connection for my company, you're going to want to have that elevator pitch handy. So, 20 seconds, 30 seconds max. It really needs to be clear and concise. Should grab people. The important thing is everybody on the team should know it by heart. So I meet a lot of early stage teams where the CEO gives a great elevator pitch, but if I happen to run into like the CTO at a networking event and I ask him what he does, he can't explain it to me in less than 15 minutes by drawing like a bunch of charts on a board. So make sure everybody on the team really knows it. So that goes to the last point, which is practicing it with everybody. And so just kind of like the four things that I think really make a good elevator pitch. So who you are, what your company does. If you've got traction, either revenue or a specific usage milestone, throw that in there. If you don't, you can go ahead and skip that. And then credibility, something you've done in the past, or if you have some early stage investors, something that kind of shows like, look, this is real. Other people have taken notices. And again, you don't have that, you can skip that as well. And the last note, which is important, is you really need to focus on describing what your product does. So what is the end result that your product is going to help your customers achieve? So not we've built a system that has feature X, Y, and Z, but like our products help our customers do this better, and so they're able to make more money because of that. So really describing what your product does, not just a list of features of your product. All right, so that was really quick, a lot of content. I apologize, but if you guys have any questions or anything, I can probably take one question real quick. All right, any quick questions?
So,
yes.
HPC in general, how do you see that kind of differing in terms of your approach?
Well, I think so with HPC companies, obviously the product development, the initial product development is going to take a little bit longer, and so you're probably not going to have as much of a fully featured product as you are when you're talking to people and potentially trying to look to get into an accelerator like that. I think finding a way to show that the team you've built is capable of executing and getting things done, whether that's kind of again early prototype of the product you're building or something else that you've done together, I think is going to be really important in an HPC type of environment. And you're figuring out a way to keep your product development lifecycle short enough that you're iterating quickly is really a challenge with HPC companies. And so figuring out creative ways to ensure that you're not saying like, oh, well, yeah, check back in 3 months when we've got our V1 of the product. Like figuring out like ways to break down the product development so you have tangible milestones that actually somebody can kind of see and not necessarily use, but actually kind of like see like, okay, they've actually making some progress along the way. That's really important as well.
One thing I always worry about with HPC is that, at least for some of it, software less so, but the hardware in particular, it's capital intensive.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything like that with these incubators where you really can, you might have to raise more money than normal?
Yeah, I mean, so we definitely do have some. I mean, I've got in the current TechStars Cloud program, we've got a company that had to raise $900,000 just to build out a prototype. because they're building kind of like a networking backbone, and so that's capital intensive, and then they're going to have to raise probably $5 million to build out V1 of the product. In those types of examples, it's even more emphasis on the team. So the reason they were able to raise that $1 million is because people were willing to make a bet on the team. The CEO had a successful exit from a prior company, so he had a good track record there. And the CTO obviously has the deep technical expertise that they were looking for. So there's even a more emphasis on the team in those capital intensive ones. Any other questions? All right, thank you guys.
Oh yeah. Time for one more?
Yep.
Yeah, so, relative to the HPC question, you obviously get some affinity for it if you're here, but
Yep.
what about all of your other partners that as soon as they hear HPC, they're checking their email and...
Yeah, so that's a good, exactly. So that's a great point. I mean, I think there are, and this is true of accelerators, same with investors. I mean, there are particular partners inside of firms, and there are particular, MDs inside of an accelerator network like TechStars that have more of an affinity towards these types of products and these types of companies. So, obviously the program I run where we're focused on cloud, there's an increasing overlap between HPC and kind of where cloud is going. But there are, I can name 3 other managing directors that are all very excited by these types of companies and this type of technology. But that's 4 of us out of 20.
Right.
And so like if you are interested in a particular accelerator or a particular firm, like it is important to do your homework, try to figure out like, okay, what are the individuals inside that firm that are and work to get the connection to them, because otherwise you're right, they're if they don't understand the space or they don't understand the technology, they're checked out by the time you've said 2 sentences about what your company does. So that is an important point.
But I think that's true, like for any, we hear a lot about like wearables investors or hardware investors or kind of, there are people who have niches, and so you'll hear Sulu next, but there are wonderful people like Data Collective out in California, and they're investors in Michigan, where this is all they do.
Yeah.
So it's same as with wearables, same as with pharma, so you just gotta target those right people.
So since you were talking about that, could you list some of the arguments against putting money in HPC?
So I think the biggest argument right now is that compute itself was just being commoditized away, and so unless you're Google, Amazon, or Microsoft, like there's not money to be made in the space. I completely disagree, but I've heard the argument made lots of different times.
There were 2 points on your slides that seems even more applicable to HPC engineers. We run into it again and again, which is the engineers that tend to come out of this community have been coddled in a way. A lot of us come from academia, and again, people get their feelings hurt on the technology, and their execution time is just incredibly low.
Yep.
Have you evolved any techniques with some of the people you had to address those, particularly with the teams? Because oftentimes at the top level, we're used to that.
Yeah.
You don't take anything personally, everything can be thrown out, but the people that are actually responsible for developing the core technology often have serious problems with those.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're key people.
Yeah.
Any
So I
feelings
think
about
on the brutal intellectual honesty front, the one thing that I think is really important is you can't have that without deep trust, because without like the trust component being there, then it feels like you're personally attacking them or their technology or what they've developed. And so figuring out ways to do trust, to build that trust is really important. And so like I do an exercise with the companies that come through my program called Lifeline, where I kind of tell them my life story in terms of personal and professional highs and lows and kind of throughout my life. And that helps people understand kind of where I'm coming from, my background, and it goes a long way to start building that trust. So finding a way to build the trust within the team is really important. In terms of the execution and doing stuff fast, I mean, it's just,
You want to use the carrot, not the whip.
Yeah, exactly.
But the whip's so easy.
It is. So I don't know. That's not one that I like have like a quick ready response to be able to handle. So, all right.
One more, or are we done? One more.
Yep.
No, I think we're done for now. You have one?
Yeah.
Make it quick.
Okay, I know we could probably keep you here all day. Thank you.
Oh, no problem.
You had a bullet there about you're absolutely not here for your ideas.
Yep.
Now, the world runs on great ideas. So can you sort of reconcile that?
Yeah, I mean, so I think like so what I've learned, and I'd been told this before, but I'd never really believed it, was like, ideas are cheap, execution is everything. And until about a year and a half ago when I joined TechStars, I heard that, but I hadn't believed it. And what I found is, I get any great idea that I get pitched on, I probably get pitched that same idea 3 or 4 different times over the course of a 6-month period. And so it's very rare that you come across this one unique idea that nobody else has had that like totally revolutionizes everything, And so, ideas are great, but what's much more important than that is your ability to take that idea, break it down into kind of a set of measurable milestones and start executing against those milestones. That is always going to win out over somebody that's kind of like thinking, oh, I've got the next, $1 billion idea and nobody else is going to have this same idea that I will have. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.